Welcome, everyone, to the audio description visual interpreting for the A11yNYC November Meetup. We will begin our visual interpreting once the program appears on the A11yNYC YouTube channel.
Janine, could you scroll up?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for our live description of the A11Y Meetup in NYC. We are currently experiencing technical difficulties with the audio from the meeting room there, and we will be with that as soon as possible. In the meeting room, there is currently a slide on the screen that shows noti.st/segdeha. And tonight's presentation is by Andrew Hedges from Assistive Labs. He's a co-founder of Assistive Labs, formerly at Disney, Apple, and Zapier. He's been a pro web developer since 1998. Andrew Hedges is currently still giving his introduction. He has an introduction slide on the screen. Also on the screen is an ASL interpreter and a video of Andrew Hedges. We are working to resolve our sound issues so we can bring that to you soon. Today's agenda, talk about accessibility maturity models, talk about continuous accessibility, talk about how continuous accessibility can contribute to accessibility maturity. He indicates that he is focusing on advocating for the use of technology and automation for accessibility maturity. We are still experiencing technical difficulties. We appreciate you guys joining us tonight and experiencing the early days of our live description events. There's currently some buffering from the site in NYC, and we are working on getting the sound and the video feedback. Currently on screen, accessibility maturity models help us, one, identify the organization's current stage of maturity. Two, identify gaps between the current stage and the next stage. Three, develop a plan to move the organization from the current stage to the next stage. And it's from the Accessibility Operations Guidebook. Thank you, everyone that's joining us tonight for live audio description from Ira. Here we are experiencing technical difficulties receiving the audio from the NYC location. We can see their video feed, and I will review the screens as they are here, the slides that are visible for us, and hopefully we'll get audio soon. On screen slide says example maturity models, ability nets DAMM, level accesses DAMM, Microsoft's accessibility evolution model AEM, and W3C's accessibility maturity model. Currently on screen, maturity model structure, dimensions, stages, proof points. W3C accessibility maturity model. Dimensions. And dimensions include communications, knowledge and skills, support, ICT, information and communication technology, development lifecycle, personnel, procurement, and culture. On screen, stages. Inactive, no awareness and recognition of need. Launch, recognize need organization wide. Planning initiated, but activities not well organized. Integrate, roadmap in place, overall organizational approach defined and well organized. And then optimize, incorporated into the whole organization, consistently evaluated, and actions taken on assessment outcomes. An example, dimension, ICT development lifecycle, category, user research, proof point, user research includes disabilities. the point, trend up or trend down? The slide shows clockwork mechanisms and the word about continuous improvement. Continuous accessibility helps you have greater confidence in the quality of your code, more easily deliver accessible experiences at scale, responsibly reduce your organization's risk, from continuousaccessibility.com. Continuous integration / continuous deployment, CI/CD. And again, thank you to everyone who's joining us for Ira's live audio description of tonight's event. We are still working to bring you an audio feed from the event there in New York. Currently in the room, the live ASL interpreter is shown on the screen, as well as Andrew Hedges, who is illustrating the points, and we have the CI/CD screen up still.
Against the tide of the dominant culture. So in that article, EJ argues that our tools, in many cases, reinforce ableism itself. But how exactly? So examples include assuming all users are using a mouse. So there's lots of libraries out there that are mouse-based. There are libraries out there that simulate keyboard events, but that's not the same as like faithfully emulating user input. So that's just a couple of examples. All right.
Automatic versus automated.
For a second while I take a drink of water. So thankfully, automation-friendly tools specifically designed to address accessibility started appearing over the last few years, including AxeCore by DQ, Site Scanner from Evinced, and others. In a recent article reminding us why we can't just have nice things, Bogdan and Sarevok, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, cautions us to be aware of the limitations of some of the tools that we use to validate accessibility. So specifically, he contends that automatic accessibility testing can detect inaccessibility, but can't detect accessibility. And I agree with that. In fact, I really like the fact that he used the word automatic and not automated. Because there is such a thing as automated tools that can do things like take into account design intent, which the automatic tools can't do. The automatic tools are great for a lot of things. And as an industry, we put a lot of faith into automatic tools, including scanners and linters, that apply rule sets to websites to report on accessibility errors. And it's helpful to an extent, a large extent, but we need to understand what the tools can and can't do. The primary thing scanners and linters can't do that humans can is understand the intent behind a design. So in a specific UI flow, what's the path through it for an assistive technology user to accomplish the task? And irrespective of any WCAG failures, how good is the experience of attempting to accomplish the task, for example, using screen reader or voice control?
Try to turn up the volume.
Okay, even more? All right. I could hear a little bit of almost feedback behind me, but I'll project if you want.
Sorry, give us one moment. Sorry, we apologize.
Yeah.
Your voice a little louder.
Okay, yeah. No worries.
We did a new
He's
setup.
addressing
We're
someone
excited
who's
to
off screen.
Change up our environment. We're just going to move the speaker.
And apparently we weren't the only ones who were having some audio issues.
Okay, on the back of this one.
Should I say stuff so you know
Yeah.
how loud it is? I can keep talking about whatever, you know. How's the volume now?
Okay.
I'm even, if I lean back, I don't hear any feedback. Okay. Yeah, is that working? Is that better? Are you all in the room? Were you all having trouble hearing me too? Or was it mostly going through the, okay. There it is. Woo. Okay. All right. How's that?
That's good.
Okay, everyone happy? All right, cool. All right, so we were just talking about how good of an experience are we, is it, you know, and the automatic tools aren't really able to tell us that. So another category of automatable, which isn't actually a word my spell checker tells me, but another category of automatable tests is end-to-end, or sometimes called E2E tests. Those validate flows through a user interface. So for example, logging in, creating a project, creating a task, that kind of thing. This is a way of encoding human judgment about the design into a test that then can be automated, okay? So unfortunately, most end-to-end testing frameworks suffer from the ableist traits that I mentioned earlier. You want me to move my microphone up? Can do that, no problem.
When you have, you just hold it in your hand. Okay.
Oh yeah? All right. Then I can't take my drink water. All right, is that better? I just want Jolly to be happy, that's all.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so some of the end-to-end testing frameworks suffer from these same ableist kind of traits. So, and offer only limited support for accessibility out of the box. So I'm going to refrain here from making a full product pitch, but except to say that at Assistive Labs, where I work, we've created an end-to-end testing framework that treats accessibility as a first-class concern. So I know it can be done. So before I continue, I want to acknowledge that manual QA and periodic audits are super valuable tools also. They're essential really to ensuring the accessibility, not just the not accessibility of our digital
On
products,
screen.
but they're not what we're talking about tonight. We're
What continuous
really talking
accessibility
tonight about
is
what,
not
we can
manual
responsibly
QA,
offload to the
periodic
machines.
audits.
All right, so what makes continuous accessibility so compelling? And it's something that I call attention decay. So attention decay is the idea that the sooner after it's made that an engineer finds out that their change broke something, the more likely they are to fix it. Okay, so say you're a developer, you find out something that you shipped 6 months ago is broken. You've moved on, users have been living with the bug for months. At best, you're probably going to add it to the bug tracker and maybe ship a fix at some point in the future when it gets scheduled. But imagine you find out you shipped a bug earlier that day, right? The context of the change is still fresh in your mind. You have the opportunity to fix the bug before it affects very many people. So you're likely to jump on it and ship a fix right away. And this dynamic actually applies to any type of bug, but it helps explain why tests in CI/CD are so popular and so valuable. just in general, because it means catching problems before they impact your users, all right? So let's talk next about the types of automatable tools.
Automatic,
So
automated.
in the automatic category, we have linters, such as Axe Accessibility Linter by DQ, scanners, including Advanced and Wave Testing Engine, flow-based tests with Axe integrated. So I know DQ has a tool like that, and Cypress is has a similar tool. And additionally, there are starting to emerge automated tools that extend what we can expect of the machines. So like I mentioned, accessibility first, end-to-end tests, like what we're trying to do at Assistive Labs. So both automatic and automated tools are useful, and should probably be part of your process, but it's important to understand the differences in how they apply to your use case. All right. Okay, so this is where we get down to, that should be
Continuous accessibility plus accessibility maturity. A
caveats
robot
aside,
sits on a bench
automated
holding a
solutions for
tablet.
validating the accessibility of digital products can contribute significantly to improving our accessibility maturity. So earlier, Persing's book, the Accessibility Guidebook, on the website for Devin's book, which is linked in my that noticed in the slides, she links to a handy spreadsheet for calculating scores for the different dimensions of the W3C accessibility maturity model. So we're going to use that spreadsheet as a way to explore the difference that automated tools can make. And again, we're using the W3C's model not because it's objectively the best in some way, but because by virtue of originating from a standards body, it's the one that's least proprietary. That was the criteria. As I covered earlier, that model defines 7 dimensions, dozens of individual proof points. We're going to narrow that down to what's relevant to continuous accessibility. All right.
Relevant proof points under the
Text,
ICT development lifecycle
We'll go through
dimension.
them individually, though.
Development, quality review
So
through
relevant
release.
proof points for our purposes fall under the ICT dimension include the following. In the development category, developers' accessibility checklists, consistent approach to implementing accessibility features across products. In the quality review through release category, consistent approach to testing and releasing products. Testing process includes automated accessibility testing. That seems pretty applicable. And accessibility identified as product release gate. So next we're going to talk about how continuous accessibility applies to each of those proof points. And before I go on, I just want to kind of be transparent about my methodology. So first thing I did was I made a copy of Devin's spreadsheet. I then duplicated the ICT tab and set all the proof points back to no activity. So Devin's spreadsheet actually was, she had it all set up for kind of a past project that she had done just as an illustration. I set everything back to no activity so we could start from 0 and see what difference and isolate the effect of continuous accessibility. Then I updated the evidence dropdown for each of the relevant proof points for each stage by doing my best to log the minimum state that must have been true if continuous accessibility is applied. So I was trying to be very conservative about my estimates of what the actual impact was. So let's start with development, specifically the proof point developers accessibility checklist. So I hope this isn't too much of a stretch, but you can think of linters as a kind of checklist of heuristics that are automatically applied to code within the context of an integrated development environment, IDE, such as VS Code. So if you're not a coder, with a linter installed, a developer will see warnings right there where they're coding about certain types of accessibility issues. So ideally, these same heuristics are then enforced in CI/CD. So in other words, if you're using Axe DevTools linter, it probably makes sense to use Axe in your CI/CD as well to make sure you're getting consistent results. Okay, so there are other more manual checklists that you can and probably should implement that cover areas that Axe and similar tools can't. So for example, you may want your team to evaluate new UI using Microsoft Accessibility Insights self-guided audit feature. So you can apply human judgment to things like tab order. So while linters partially satisfy this proof point, they're not enough to get by themselves to get us to 100% complete. So we're going to say partially implemented across all 4 stages. That's good for 8 points. Okay, I'll explain the points in a second. All right, next proof point under development is consistent. Under development is consistent approach to implementing accessibility features across products. So automated tools can validate code before it's released, so they can be used to enforce a consistent baseline of functionality. But meeting this proof point should really involve shifting sort of well left of the development phase into UX research and UI design. So again, continuous accessibility gets us part of the way there, but not to 100% complete. So that's another 8 points. For those scoring at home, we're up to 16 out of a possible 300 points. Okay, doesn't sound too good for CA just yet, but it'll get better, I promise. So let's move on to the quality review through release category. So the first proof point here is consistent approach to testing and releasing products. So implementing continuous accessibility tooling should be considered, I think, essential but not sufficient for meeting this proof point, because while automating testing can help us find certain classes of bugs basically in real time, manual validation by humans is still necessary for areas that the machines can't test or where they don't give us 100% confidence. So another example where continuous accessibility partially satisfies the proof point. So we're up to 24 out of 300. Okay. There's a slide on the screen of a stack of Swiss cheese slices. This is a little different than all the text-based slides that I've had up to now. But so before I continue, I want to go a little deeper on that last proof point. Cam, who introduced me a little earlier, first turned me on to this analogy of layers of testing being like a stack of Swiss cheese slices. So any one slice would allow light, water, I don't know, barbecue sauce, whatever, to leak through. But by stacking the slices, you put at least some cheese between the top and bottom of the stack. Does that make sense? So I bring this up because unlike the other proof points that I'm talking about, consistent approach to testing and releasing products is not explicitly tied to accessibility. And that's because
And to everyone that's still with us, please bear with us. We are having some technical difficulties, and we will be back as soon as possible. For anyone that's just joined us, thank you for joining Ira for a live audio description of the A11Y New York City Meetup on continuous accessibility. And we are currently having technical difficulties. We're trying to get the stream back. Thank you to everyone joining us tonight for Ira's live audio description of the A11yNYC Meetup. We are currently experiencing technical difficulties and we're working to get that feedback. For anyone who's still with us today, thank you for joining us for a live audio description of the A11yNYC Meetup on continuous accessibility. And we are experiencing technical difficulties and working to get that video and audio feedback. And thank you everyone who's joined us tonight for live audio description from Ira for the A11yNYC Meetup. We are experiencing.
The video thumbnails are
I don't know,
minimized to
I think
optimize
the day
for
is
video
coming
sharing.
where,
We are back.
The same, I don't know, it's partly probably organizational too in some cases where a company, like they don't value accessibility to the same degree they do just, like a user can't log in or something.
Currently
like
on
that's,
screen,
gotta stop the
we
line.
see
Our end-to-end tests value
presenter
that.
Andrew
But if it's,
Hedges.
oh,
He
but,
is
people make
standing
these
in
terrible
front
arguments around,
of
it's only this
a
percentage of users
green
that can't do the
leafy
thing.
plant.
Well, we'll ship it and
No
fix it later. It's
slides
like,
are
well,
being shown, and
it's not
also
how
behind
it should
him
be done,
is live
but it's how
ASL
I've kinda seen it done.
interpreter.
I have a philosophy, or I have a theory on this, which is that most end-to-end test suites, CI integration suites,
A
are
person in
authored
the
by
audience holds a
engineers
microphone.
explicitly saying, I expect the software to do this thing. And when it fails, it comes back to them. And it's very clear. This behavior, I canonized it in my test. When you introduce some automation tooling that is not authored by the developer, that might be kind of inscrutable to them or a little bit foreign, it's really easy to just kind of turn off somehow. I think there is a place where something like assistive labs, you're running end-to-end tests that you've authored that use assistive technology. If that fails, absolutely you should fail to build. But like there's this psychological bit, I think, that if you haven't written, like using Axe core, for example, I didn't author the Axe core assertions. I might not understand them. If I see them failing in CI, that may be a little foreign to me, and I don't take immediate ownership over it. It's unfortunate, but I think that's true.
He hands the microphone back.
Thanks.
Yeah. Question from Carl.
There's also a bit of a difference between, let's say you're writing functional end-to-end tests and a complete scenario fails, right? And so it represents a failure of a task, whereas accessibility tests don't necessarily represent that. And going back to Cameron's point, when you're dealing with a large volume of issues, which are, at least on the surface, sort of superfluous noise, as opposed to something that rises the occasion of being a complete failure for a user to perform a task. And so I think that's kind of the big difference that people see. So at Tenon, we had people, they would put it in their builds and they would create a dashboard out of the results and then sift through the results to determine, but they would never turn a build red because of that same exact sort of a mix between what Cameron said and then there's the whole issue of severity and all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to turn it over to Dylan.
About 25 people are
gonna change the
seated in
subject.
chairs around the meeting room.
I could go on about that, but did I miss something? Is it possible to get to 36% in that maturity model without fixing a single issue?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah,
Because I didn't see anywhere in there a requirement to actually
to
fix
actually
stuff.
remediate anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So you got to 36% without actually doing anything?
Yeah. It's detection. It's process. It's.
I didn't. No, I just. I thought
Yeah.
I missed it.
I'll respond to that, because we actually.
Oh, hang on.
So by authoring a test suite using assistive
Andrew
technology,
Hedges.
you're declaring that something works with that assistive technology. So if you have a failure, you're regressing. So by failing to regress, you're maintaining a level of accessibility, right?
We got to serialize the back and forth.
But he didn't actually block, in his assessment of his score, it got him to 36%. He didn't force the build to not progress. So he's actually getting 36% without committing to fixing anything. It's just an observation.
Yeah.
It's like
No, you're not wrong
people,
either. And
people, criticize this, that, or the other measure of whatever accessibility you've achieved, and I'm just pointing that out.
But Cameron, are you implying that having the test assumes that it's also making sure that you're that you're fixing the stuff that you find, right? Yeah.
We got folks on the live stream. Got to hear you.
Okay.
So if I write a test that says a mouse-based test that exercises a login flow, I'm explicitly asserting this should work with a mouse. And it does, because the test passed. To your point, if you're not failing CI in your end-to-end test, you're doing something wrong. But I think this implies spiritually that you would fail those tests. Understandably, for the reasons we've talked about, I think the industry is not to a point where, first of all, historically, we haven't had the tools to do this effectively with end-to-end tests. And secondly, just our imagination as engineering organizations has not caught up to what's possible today.
Yeah, so we actually have an article coming out with Asana in a couple of weeks where we're going to talk a lot about how Asana uses our end-to-end testing framework. Asana is not currently failing builds, right? Correct? Okay, so, and Asana is not authoring the tests. So maybe there's a thing there where at some point, we are able to open up our library to be more platform as a service, and you're writing your own tests. And then maybe there's a little bit of a mental switch that goes on for developers where it's like, I wrote the test, so if it fails, yeah, we shouldn't ship this thing. Right now, it's still in a little bit of a gray area, even though we can do the right kind of assertions. We still, there's still maybe a little path to walk there to get to that. But you're right, the 36%, there's no hard requirement to actually fix anything. You got to call Carl for that, right?
Okay. Let me look at the.
not in baseball. You make $100 million a year in baseball, 36%.
Thomas, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. Oh. Okay. Okay, question from Stephen. In my experience, that folks are most interested in and affected by the results of improvements in the maturity model have been management and folks not quite in the weeds. What's your experience? Yeah,
I mean, that matches my experience. So my main experience came at Zapier, where we went down the path of AbilityNet's sort of self-assessment. And I was saying to Dylan before the talk that one of the things that I found valuable about that was just the conversations that it prompted. Some people who in leadership who clearly hadn't thought too deeply about accessibility were then talking about it, right? And they were in a breakout room with people who were kind of on the front lines of trying to fix things, and they get at least some level of conversation happen. But so one of the things that Melanie does in her continuous accessibility work is talk a lot about metrics and what you should be paying attention to. Metrics are the kind of things that leadership are going to pay attention to. If you can consistently track, the number of defects is going down, or the time to resolution is getting shorter, like some of these kinds of things, then those are numbers that might catch the attention of leadership. But.
Another question from Crystal Scott. As a web engineer, how can I help clients and organizations maintain accessibility long-term? I often see sites regress after remediation. What strategies ensure sustained conformance?
Well, we have a little tool for that.
Right.
I think it's, and Devin actually, and Persing in her book talks a lot about this, where like the way to do this stuff right is it needs to really be across the entire organization. And it's not something you can do piecemeal. She talks in her book about sort of just the friction of all these little ad hoc efforts. And once you can kind of institutionalize accessibility across the organization, the friction and people paying attention to it, and it kind of not happening automatically, but you know what I mean? Like it just kind of like starts to happen as a matter, like part of the course of doing business. But it really takes a lot of education, a lot of laying groundwork, a lot of being patient. She talks a lot about organizational change in her book. And it's the interesting thing about, the book is great. I just started reading it. But she talks a lot about how you don't expect to be doing organizational change as an accessibility person. You think you're going to be fixing a website and like making it so it works with a screen reader, but you end up doing all these things that are maybe outside of your actual skill set, and that's where a lot of people burn out because you're trying to do everything at once. So if you're lucky enough to be in a big enough organization where you have somebody who can manage the program, and then subject matter experts who are separate from that person, like you're in a really good spot. But
yeah. And I can, anybody who hasn't yet, I can also second the recommendation. Devin's book, I got through it first read this weekend, and now I'm circling back to kind of go through it in deeper dive, and it's very good. Any other questions in the room?
Cameron scans
Any
the
other
room.
debates? Okay. All right. Anything else on live stream, Thomas? Great. All right. So, thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate your time in person. We appreciate your time online. Thank you to Andrew.
Thank you so much, everybody.
The best thing about this meetup is everybody here. Like, we wouldn't have this without everybody here. It's a really cool community, and we love every time we've got a different group of folks. Of the 5,000 members we have a different group that attends online and in person, and it's really cool to just see how far and how many different angles and lenses that we can approach accessibility through. It's really great. Thanks to Julie McPhee for running the entire, without him, the whole thing falls apart. So really appreciate Jelly. And Mira by Night for captions again. Meryl Evans writes a blog post, a recap on equalentry.com of the events, so keep an eye out for that. We want to thank our sponsors once again, Ira for providing the live audio description on the YouTube stream, as well as ASL interpretation. Thanks, Flip. And AKQA for providing the space. AKQA is a digital agency that provides this space and does digital innovation for lots of different brands. DQ, leader in digital accessibility tools, services, and training. Equal Entry, digital accessibility consultancy focused on results. Events, software for accessible development. And Fable, an accessibility platform powered by people with disabilities. I think that's it. Thanks again, everybody. Folks in person, feel free to hang out. We've got the space till 9-ish, so hang out, visit. Everybody on the live stream, thanks again for joining. See you next time. Oh, wait, sorry, last thing. Next month, our next event is Tuesday, December 3rd, so just a couple weeks. And it'll be Fred Moltz talking about how they built the Verizon Accessibility Testing Lab in New Jersey. Should be a really great one, so hope to see you then. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, everybody who joined us tonight for live audio description presented by Ira. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you to our visual interpreter, Diane, for her services tonight. We will be announcing the next A11yNYC event in December with a slightly different format, so stay tuned for that. And if you have questions or comments about tonight's event, you can send an email to support@ira.io. Thank you, everyone.